Hello, my name is Jason Reichl, and you're listening to Risk Management Brick by Brick. I'm fascinated with people who are helping build and maintain the physical world around us. On each episode of this podcast, we'll dive in with a risk manager, speak to them about how technology plays a role in this process.
David, thank you for joining me on Brick by Brick. I'm excited to be having you. Why don't we start with an intro?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for having me on.
Of course.
I work at Alliant Insurance Services. I'm a senior vice president. My role is primarily around cyber claims and policy wording, making sure that the coverage is fit for purpose for our clients, that the policy performs when they have a claim, and also educating them around incident response, helping them integrate their insurance into their incident response planning, taking part in tabletop exercises, everything we can do to make sure that insurance it's considered as part of their incident response plan, and it's not an afterthought.
What kind of companies are we talking about that you do this for?
So Alliant is a full service brokerage firm. So we work across all industries and market segments, small, mid-size, and large accounts. There are certain industries that Alliant is probably better known in than others. For example, in construction,
Right.
in public entities, in healthcare, financial institutions. Are some industries where we are especially prominent.
So the incidents that are coming up are typically like, what kind of things are you triaging?
So from a claim standpoint, right, data breaches were kind of the impetus for a lot of companies to initially buy insurance. Now we've moved into other vectors of attack. You see business interruption claims, ransomware, and something that has been getting the attention of folks lately is really around social engineering, wire fraud, business email compromise. These may not be the largest losses. They're not necessarily the ones that grab the headlines, but they can still have an impact on business in terms of the frequency of them. And they can be 6 or 7 figure losses. So they're not insignificant.
Typically through better process.
There are better controls that can be put in place to help businesses minimize the risk.
Let's talk about some of these things, because this is an area where we do a lot of work and a lot of conversations around construction and manufacturing. A lot of the risk managers in those positions, I already have some insurance for this, right? So it can be mitigated through that. But, the world of all of these kind of new risks, AI, but also all the social engineering, all that are kind of new for some of the people in the industry, and they're trying to wrap their arms around it. What kind of frameworks, or how do you advise people to sort of structure programs with this in mind?
Right. Well, the first thing I would say is, and this may sound counterintuitive coming from an insurance broker, but you don't want to rely on insurance as a way of mitigating risk, right? It's a risk transfer tool. It's a backstop. It's not a substitute for having good security, good controls in place. And to be honest, the underwriters don't want to provide coverage if you don't have the requisite controls in place. So it's not a substitute, and we would never recommend that. Some of the things that businesses should be doing to guard against this include making sure that they have the right security controls, such as multi-factor authentication, a good email filtering system, but also educating their employees to be able to spot phishing emails. And there are vendors that can come in and help train people to do this. Also, it's important people talk about know your customer. You also need to know your service provider, know your vendor, have an established procedure in place for them to make updates in payment or wire instructions, because very often what happens is an employee will get an email that's cleverly crafted, and the sender will tell them that they immediately need to change these instructions because they are in the system.
I've gotten those emails.
Yeah, they might be in your business's system or that of your vendor.
Yeah.
And they have been watching, and they know that the coffee distributor payment is due on the 17th of the month. And so on the 16th, they send something out saying, we've updated our wire instructions. Pick up the phone, call the vendor. Don't use the phone number in the email you just received if it's suspicious. Go to your records, call them, and make sure that you can authenticate, as we say, out of band, that this payment instruction change is in fact legitimate.
Yeah. So love that. Have had that happen many times. I'm in meetings. Somehow someone knows that on my calendar. They'll email my employees and say, hey, Jason needs something right away, right? That's another way they're doing it. But what about, let's take this a year in the future when these criminals are using AI deepfake to have my voice call my work colleague on the phone and ask for something right away, as an emergency. How are you guys advising to stay ahead of where the technology is going?
Well, first of all, the good news is that the coverage will still respond. Should be no distinction in your policy in terms of whether the attack was perpetrated with the use of AI. The bad news is that you're absolutely right. The attacks are getting more and more sophisticated. We've actually now seen for one of our clients the first phishing incident, this voice phishing, if you will, that has gotten headlines. There was a very high-profile event in Hong Kong last year where someone made off with $20 million, and now we're beginning to see this in terms of our own clients. Again, it is a matter of having a healthy degree of skepticism when you're the recipient of these emails or that voice message, right? Hang up the phone, call the person at the correct number, maybe even set up some type of what's the password system, right? Something so that somebody might not necessarily know how to navigate that and circumvent it.
And stuff that's in data or information that could be in multiple systems as well, right?
And you need to also limit the number of people at an organization that are authorized to have access to these accounts, right? And then within that, have some backup systems in place where maybe someone receives the email, another person has to do the out-of-band authentication, and then you have to have an executive sign off on it. So you kind of have like a 3-layer system to have some checks and balances.
It's the nuclear football pass thing happening, right? Yeah, I love that. What role does cyber insurance play in helping companies recover from wire fraud? And where do they usually fall short as a company?
So cyber insurance is one of several products that can respond to an event like this. In addition to cyber, folks should also check their crime or fidelity bond coverage, because there may in fact be, depending on the type of attack, coverage under that as well. Plus, if it's a service provider whose network was compromised and you have an axe to grind with them, there may be coverage under their professional liability. So there's sort of a patchwork of different policies that could come into play. On the cyber, there's essentially 4 different types of cybercrime losses that are picked up under a cyber policy. Let's set aside the cryptocurrency, right? There's this Bitcoin mining type stuff.
Right.
That's a whole other category, but let's set that aside for a minute. A fraudulent transfer of funds directly out of your bank account is more likely to be picked up under your crime or fidelity bond.
Right.
But check, there may be coverage under the cyber as well.
Ransomware or something.
Oh, sure. That would be cyber.
Yeah.
A social engineering claim. And when we talk about social engineering could be used to perpetrate a wide variety of events, but I'm talking here strictly about the misappropriation of funds, right? So if someone perpetrates through some type of fraudulent impersonation, a change in payment or wire instructions, your employee falls for it and they execute on that request, right? That loss is typically picked up under a cyber policy. Again, there may also be coverage under the crime. The third category that we don't want to ignore is something called invoice manipulation. And you typically won't find this under the crime. An invoice manipulation is where your customer pays on a fraudulent invoice that supposedly came from you, but it didn't, and you end up with a bad receivable on your books.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's coverage for that as well.
Amazing. It's always fascinating to think about how you have to have these programs built to manage all these different incidents and how they might come up, you know?
But some of this stuff is not available off the shelf. You have to kind of negotiate it, endorse a program. You have to have the right wording.
Yeah. How should businesses balance investing in technology while investing in effective risk management practices? I'm going to ask that again because I don't like how that's worded. But, you know, when we're talking about technology and the risk that businesses expose themselves to, we're in a tight economy. Businesses have to be nimble and accept work maybe that's risky or relationships that are maybe riskier. How are you sort of managing what the programs look like, what their technology should look like with this new inherent risk that businesses are having to accept to do work?
Well, let's talk about the structure of a lot of organizations, right? Now, many of your listeners are risk managers, right? And what they're going to find is that a lot of the decision-making around preventing these events is siloed. You have risk management, is actually the buyer of the insurance.
Yeah.
You have IT that is controlling what, email filters are being used and what social engineering training is happening.
Right.
You have HR who might be responsible for offboarding employees to decredential them so they no longer have privileged access to your accounts, and even legal can get involved, right? Bringing these people together and having them understand that there's a shared interest in mitigating these events instead of seeing them at odds with each other. It's like you say, how do you balance the technology with the risk management? We don't want IT to be the enemy.
Right.
IT is trying to keep us safe, but also at the same time take advantage of these new technologies to make a company profitable, right? So we have to find a way to do that working together. One of the things that risk managers can do, I think, to elevate their profile within an organization is to bring in an outside firm like Alliant to conduct a tabletop exercise for their internal stakeholders,
Right.
for the folks in the C-suite.
Everybody, they're in it together and show where those gaps are.
And to show, first of all, oh, we have insurance for this? I didn't realize that, right?
Right.
Oh, there's certain vendors we have to use. Let's integrate that into the planning, right? Not to impede the technology from developing, but to make sure we go about this in a way that's in line with the rights and the responsibilities that you have under the policy. And then the risk manager looks like a star within their own organization because they've brought in an additional resource.
Absolutely. I'm telling risk managers now and advising that you really need to be like in the part of the business that creates opportunity and show people that, that this is not a no. The risk management team is not a no. It's a yes, but how? Right.
You don't want to be seen as vetoing everything.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the work with a lot of construction companies, and a lot of the risk managers, some of these construction companies have taken an approach of like basically cutting off access to everything. No. And I'm like, I'm not sure that's going to really benefit you in the long run. What are some emerging cyber risks that organizations should be prepared for? We talked about the voice one. What are some other?
Obviously, these phishing schemes and now the use of AI even to develop avatars that can impersonate C-level executives or vendors or whomever. We have to be aware of how AI is going to be deployed to advance these threats. It's not, again, from the standpoint of coverage, something that should be excluded, but it does lower the barrier to entry. It makes it more feasible for threat actors to get in and to perpetrate these events. Quantum computing is just going to rapidly accelerate the ability of threat actors to crack the code, so to speak.
Yeah.
To be able to try to bust different passwords or to be able to, develop different methods of attack or identify zero-day vulnerabilities. Yeah. These vulnerabilities for which there is no patch, right? It doesn't change the essential character of the threat. It just means that they're going to be more persistent, more pervasive, and, frankly, more sophisticated, harder to stop.
Yeah. And then technology hopefully will come along behind it, but technology is usually behind the criminals, right? We have to rely on solid processing, solid risk matrix, solid breakdowns of where your risks are, defining that appetite. And I love when you bring, the understanding of the technology risk, but with the risk management background of understanding that like these things are processes that need to be followed. They're frameworks that need to be deployed. They're role plays that need to happen with the team. There are all these sort of things you can be doing to prepare yourself.
Yeah. I mean, look, 10 years ago, the conversation was the chief information officer might have said, oh, we don't need cyber insurance. Nobody can hack us.
Yeah.
Right. We're not a likely target, or we have the best controls in place. Nobody's really saying that anymore because we recognize everyone is a target. So with that in mind, let's break down the wall between risk management and IT,
right,
and get people to work together.
Let's do a game of risky or not. Risky or too risky? Okay. All right. Skipping the employee background check to expedite hiring. Risky or too risky?
Too risky. Too risky. Too many incidents are perpetrated by rogue employees or rogue former employees. You really need to know who you're hiring.
I love that. Great. Allowing updates to come from a software automatically. Risky or too risky?
Well, that's a tough one because unfortunately there have been software updates that were pushed out by vendors who themselves had been hacked.
Yeah.
So while I want to say you want to patch early and often, you also need to be careful to not be taking something blindly from a service provider, particularly if it's off the cycle of the cadence that you would normally expect from them. This is why it's so important for organizations to get information from outside entities like CISA, that put out updates in terms of critical vulnerability exploits and things to watch out for. So I'm going to say that it's right on the line. It's too risky because it's been compromised, but that's not an excuse not to patch.
I just had a healthcare system company on, And they were telling me the story about how they bought an ultrasound machine, same one they always buy, and they needed it right away because something happened where it broke. And so they needed to buy these. So they bought 10 new ones, brought them in, had the same software, had everything. But what they didn't know is they were loaded with AI capabilities, right? And so someone got in through the back door of that and started taking information off those machines, right? And it passed all the checks, same hardware, same software version, all of these things. But, because a lot of companies are just switching on their AI feature right with AI or do this other thing, it's introducing stuff in it. So I think it's more important now than ever to really have that stuff covered successfully. Let's go down to a real life scenario here. Have you ever tried an extreme diet detox?
No.
Is that risky or too risky?
Anything with the word extreme in it is probably too risky.
Too risky.
I'm still trying to lose my COVID-19, but other than that, no.
I love that.
Not going to do anything crazy.
I'm from California. They're always trying to get me to do some extreme detox. Going on a date with someone, imagine you were single here. Going on a date with someone you met online without any prior video calls, risky or too risky?
In this day and age, incredibly too risky. I'm thankful to say that when I was single, we didn't have this type of technology wasn't in play. So see this, happily married 25 years. Never had to worry about that. So too risky.
Too risky. Last one. This is an interesting one. Eating food past its expiration date. Risky or too risky?
Okay, in my book, that is too risky. That becomes an issue at home. You're throwing good food away.
Yeah.
I don't know. Expiration dates are often earlier than is necessary because they're trying to safeguard.
That's what my girlfriend tells me too. But
Manufacturer, right? But when in doubt, throw it out.
There we go. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you. Thank you for helping just define a very gray area in our industry and help organizations respond to these threats because, pretty soon this is something that, it's going to be the heart of what risk management is for a lot of these organizations, and so I really appreciate your guidance here.
Absolutely. And our company is all about helping clients find a more rewarding way to manage risk. And that's one of the reasons that we want to put content out to make sure that clients understand what they need to do to stay safe.
Thank you very much, man.
Risk Management Brick by Brick is brought to you by TrustLayer. Find out how TrustLayer manages risk so that the people can build the physical world around us. Head over to TrustLayer.io and then make sure to subscribe to Risk Management Brick by Brick on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. On behalf of the TrustLayer team, thank you for listening.